As we mark Women's Month and it gains momentum, we pay tribute to women making their mark. Professor Hangwelani Magidimisha-Chipungu made history by becoming the first black South African woman to obtain a full professor in town and regional planning. She's currently with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and she joins us this morning to tell us more about her work. Prof, thank you very much for your time this morning and congratulations.
Thank you very much and good morning to you.
What was the attraction with this particular field of study?
I always wanted to study cities and how they are arranged and how people relate to cities. But obviously, coming from rural areas, I don't remember being told about town planning. But I thought this was just some geography studies, and because I was very interested in geography, and obviously I put my best foot forward. But when I go to university, I started learning about town planning and what it does and what requirements are needed, and then I jump into it. So I always wanted to study cities, sure. Hence the interest in the field.
Sure. What did you unearth about how cities are arranged and how people relate to them? For instance, the City of Gold, Johannesburg.
I've learned a lot, actually, because I'm of the view that cities respond to people's character. So depending on who's using the cities, then the city will take the characteristics of those people who are living in it. Of course, as a town planner, you have to shape to some degree how cities should be arranged and how people should move around. But people, they will actually tell you how you should plan cities. So, for example, I always make this example that you can put a street in a particular point and you say this is a crossing line, and people decide to not cross there, just a few meters away from where you put the crossing line. So that's how people are planning their own cities, to say, we don't want to cross there, we want to cross here. And that's how cities operate. But also, they are more like a magnet, right? So they are a magnet and attracts everything around them. They're engine of innovation. And because of that, you find that everyone wants to be within cities. So depending on how they run and how they are governed, they can be a very instrumental tool towards the economy. You know, we do know that the cities are actually occupying just 2% of the land surface, but they host over 60% of the population. So that tells you a lot about how cities functions and what they are.
Is that sustainable if they hold 2% of the land surface and the population is so much?
Obviously not. That's why you find that they are overly populated. And it's very difficult. The cities managers and those responsible for service delivery are not able to cope with that exodus of people coming within cities, because the coming of people to cities does not necessarily mean adjustment in terms of service delivery, infrastructure development, and the list go on. So you're having an exodus of people coming to cities, a lot of people coming within our cities, even international foreign migrants coming to cities. But we are not adjusting infrastructure. So they're using the very same infrastructure. And, you know, from town planning perspective, we attach users with the number of population. So if you are planning, you will say this residential area has got X amount of people, and therefore, because of the threshold, it does meet the threshold of having a university or not. Now, you are using that threshold based on what you know, but then a number of people, a group of people just move in, and you have not planned for that. So it becomes very difficult. It is not sustainable, to answer your question.
Is South Africa the exception to the rule where that is concerned?
I missed that one.
Is South Africa the exception to the rule? Are we finding ourselves as a country not planning ahead, maintaining the infrastructure, responding to the needs in terms of the population influx into the cities?
Yeah, I wouldn't say South Africa only as a country. It's a global crisis. People are always on the move. And it's very difficult to regulate moves, how people move in and how people move out. So it's not just a South African issue. It's a global crisis. But in South Africa being a developing country and surrounded by a number of countries, or number of countries which are actually in need, we find ourselves at the worst of position. Because it's not just surrounding countries, but we have a lot of rural areas where nothing's happening. So we invested a lot as a country in what I call metropolitan areas, but very little has been done in most of rural areas. And obviously, when you develop urban areas, you're inviting everyone in rural areas to say, you know what, come here, and this is where things are happening. And people, they disown their own areas. So maybe what we should be focusing on is to also develop those areas to make sure that we balance the resources.
When doing town and regional planning, does it take into consideration some of the socio-economic consequences of situations like these? For instance, if you take a look, when you speak to cities respond to people's characters and they are a magnet. So you take a look at Alexandra and one road separating Alexandra from Sandton, and those two spaces and how they coexist. You take a look at the Times cover, I beg your pardon, that shows the inequality in terms of spatial planning in South Africa, where you've got beautifully populated suburbs on one side, and on the other side you've got informal settlements, for lack of a better expression, if you will. And so does it take into consideration the socio-economic, or rather the consequences of such?
Yeah, I think you are raising a very critical question, and this is something that I'm dealing with in my line of work and research. I'm saying, are we planning for the people that we have in our countries, or we're planning for some sort of type of population that we have in our head? And the reason why I'm asking this question in my line of work, in my research, is that I'm seeing new development coming, right? So we've got this massive development, building of malls. But now, if you look at that mall, who cleans that mall? Who services that mall? Who's the security guard in that mall? We provide malls, and I'm giving a mall here as an example. But now, we are not thinking about people who are supposed to work in that particular space. And very often, people who are working on those malls are actually people at the lower spectrum of our economy, right? And they will need accommodation, they will need transport system. And where are you expecting those people to stay? So you give them a job, and you want them to spend close to 75% of their salary on the transport system, another whatever X amount of money on their rental. So that is to do with the poor planning, is that we are focusing more on the what we call the drivers of the economy and generating income, investment. But very little is being said and done for those at the lower spectrum. So coming back to your example, those people, you should ask those people who we are talking about in terms of the Alexander example and ask them, where do you work? People, they are getting closer to their work opportunities. So obviously some of them, they may be helpers or running a security company, working in the security companies in just across the road. So it makes sense to be closer to their workplace, isn't it? We all don't want to spend money driving and on the transport system. So that's kind of planning that we are doing, and which is something I'm dealing with in my line of work and trying to find some solution. And I'm also writing about it.
Because I'm trying to find solutions. If you take a look at what's happening in the Western Cape, for instance, right now in the city of Cape Town with the taxi strike. Yesterday we spoke to an organization, Difuna Ukwazi, and they were pointing to apartheid spatial planning and how that has not been addressed in 2023, which has led to people, literally, when you see the visuals, you've got people who were pulling other people who were in the bus, pulling people outside of the bus so they can fit in through the window. They're squeezing in to be able to get access so they can get home. And some of the people who live in Nyanga and Langa will tell you that, oh, if I get home after a certain time, then that means trouble for me. And so this taxi strike has sort of also brought to light some of the other issues. What then do we need to understand about why in 2023 we find ourselves in this position as South Africa? Prof, are you still with us? Oi, okay. It appears that the connection is frozen and it's lost. Prof, are you there? One last try? No, she's not. Okay. That was Professor Hangwelani Magidimisha-Chipungu, and she is with UKZN dealing with town and regional planning.